I stopped helping out my brother's family after he hit me with a line I'll never forget. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "No place for losers." That's when I realized I wasn't just being left out of some random event. I was being pushed out on purpose. Now, the same brother who acted like I was a burden is watching his world fall apart. And honestly, I'm not surprised. This year, for once, I actually felt good about the holidays. Things were calm. I wasn't stressed out or running around trying to pull everything together at the last minute. I had my gifts all wrapped and ready early, one for my mom, one for my dad, and of course, a good batch for Brian, his wife Amanda, and their kids. I even grabbed a few extra things, just in case someone unexpected dropped by. I couldn't say why, but I had this feeling that things were going to go well for a change. Maybe that's why it hit me so hard when I walked up to my parents' house, arms full of neatly wrapped presents, and my mom opened the door and said, without hesitation, "We don't want you here this year." I just stood there on the front porch, holding a gift bag in each hand, thinking maybe it was some kind of joke. I even let out a nervous laugh. But then I heard Brian's voice from inside, cutting through the moment. "This isn't a place for losers," he said flatly. "You're starting to wear on all of us." I looked at my mom, half expecting her to laugh and say they were kidding. But my dad didn't say anything, and my mom just stood there looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. And Brian? He had that smug, proud look on his face, like he'd finally said something he'd been holding in for a long time. I felt a flood of things all at once: embarrassment, confusion, anger, but I didn't let it show. I took a breath, kept my voice steady, and said, "All right, if that's how it is." Then I turned and walked back to my car. When I got in and looked at the bags of gifts in the passenger seat, something in me shifted. No place for losers? They're tired of me? Where was this coming from? I had a strong feeling Brian was behind it, but I couldn't figure out the reason. I'd done nothing but give and give to that family over the years. I helped pay for his kids' summer camps. I covered school supplies. I even stepped in with mortgage payments when he was struggling. And now I'm suddenly the outsider? I wasn't ready to just drive away. Not yet. I needed to understand what was really going on. So I left the gifts in the car and walked back up to the door. When I got there, my parents were still just standing inside, speaking softly like they didn't think I'd return. Brian was sprawled on the couch with his phone, acting like none of this had even happened. I didn't bother knocking this time. I stepped inside and asked straight out, "What's happening here? Why am I being shut out? What did I do wrong?" Brian didn't even lift his eyes. He just gave a little smirk and said, "You really don't get it, do you? You've been slacking. The kids barely got anything from you this year." I stared at him, completely thrown. "What are you talking about? I spent hundreds on gifts for your kids. They've got more waiting in my car than anyone else." He finally looked up. "Yeah, but last year, you did more. This year, it feels like you don't care anymore. It's embarrassing for us." I turned to my parents, thinking they'd at least say something. Maybe tell Brian he was being unfair. But my mom just gave me an awkward smile and said, "You did just buy a new car. So, you found money for that." I had to pause for a second to keep myself from saying something I'd regret. "The car's on credit," I said, calmly. "Even if it wasn't, that doesn't mean I'm automatically responsible for Brian's kids. They're not mine." Brian leaned back, like that explained everything. "You're the one who makes the most money," he said. "We're family. Family helps each other. You've always done that." I glanced at Amanda, who was sitting off to the side. She wasn't saying anything, just staring down at her hands like she wanted to disappear. Her face was red, and I could tell she didn't want to be a part of any of this. "So that's the deal now?" I asked. "Just because I helped before, I'm expected to keep doing it forever? And the moment I don't, that makes me a loser?" Brian just shrugged and said, "If the shoe fits." That was the last straw for me. I let out a breath, shook my head, and took a step back. Then I turned to my parents and said, "You know what? You're right. I don't belong here." I looked over at Brian and added, "Hope you enjoy your holiday. And good luck figuring out those gifts, because this so-called loser is done funding your life." I didn't wait around to hear what anyone had to say. I walked out, got in my car, and drove off, gripping the steering wheel tighter than I probably needed to. I didn't say a word the whole way home. My mind was spinning. I couldn't make sense of any of it. Was I somehow the bad guy here? For years, I'd done everything I could to support them, always stepping up when Brian needed help, always making sure his kids had what they needed, no matter what was going on in his life. And now, just because I didn't do as much as I had in the past, I was being called a loser and shut out? By the time I pulled into my driveway, I felt like my insides were twisting. I sat there in silence, staring out the windshield. The bags of presents were still sitting in the van, untouched. I had spent weeks picking everything out, carefully choosing what my parents would actually like, finding fun things for the kids that I knew would light up their faces. And now what? I wasn't even supposed to show up? The more I sat with it, the more I realized this went way beyond the holidays. This wasn't just about gifts or one bad night. It had been building for a long time, and I had either been too trusting or just too hopeful to notice it. The truth was, Brian had come to depend on me far more than he ever should have. From the very start of his marriage to Amanda, they had money troubles. Brian could never seem to hold down a job, and Amanda only worked part-time, barely making enough to cover the basics. I stepped in, thinking it was just for a little while. I figured a few $100 here and there would help them get through a rough patch. When they were on the verge of losing their place, I covered the rent. Later on, after their second kid came along, I chipped in to help with childcare. What was supposed to be a temporary thing stretched into years. Every time Brian hit a rough spot, he'd call me. And honestly, I usually said yes, not because I was obligated to, but because I cared about those kids. I didn't want to see them go without. Looking back, I can see now that I was part of the problem. I made it too easy. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being gratitude and turned into expectation. And then came the final blow, being told I wasn't welcome in my own family's holiday because I hadn't done enough. That's what really made it clear to me. The next morning, after getting some rest and a little clarity, I made a decision. I wasn't going to help Brian anymore. No more endless gifts to make up for what he couldn't provide. I figured he could explain to his kids why they weren't getting what they used to. That choice didn't come easy. I knew cutting things off might damage my relationship with him, his children, and possibly even my parents. But I couldn't keep letting myself be treated like some kind of money machine instead of a brother or a son. I didn't reach out to any of them, and none of them reached out to me either. I figured maybe the message finally got through. But knowing Brian, I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. New Year's Eve came and went without a single word. No calls. No messages. Nothing. My parents didn't check in. Brian didn't text. Amanda stayed silent. For the first time in years, I spent the holidays alone. I didn't expect anyone to call, but it still felt strange when midnight passed and my phone didn't light up once. I'll admit, I thought about calling them. I even picked up the phone a couple of times. But then I'd remember Brian's smug look and the way he said, "No place for losers." After everything I'd done to keep this family afloat, that's what I got in return, like I was disposable. So I gave them space. If that's what they wanted, I'd step back. But by the middle of January, something unexpected happened. Amanda, who'd always been the quiet one and never liked conflict, sent me a message out of the blue one evening. It was short and to the point. She wrote, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I don't agree with what happened. Brian won't hear it from me, but I thought you should know." I stared at that message for a long time, not sure how to respond. On the one hand, it was comforting to know that at least someone in the family saw things for what they really were. But on the other hand, her apology felt like it came too late. She had been there that night. She hadn't said a word. Eventually, I replied, "Thanks, Amanda. But this isn't something I can just forget." She didn't try to continue the conversation, and I didn't push it either. Then, not long after, something I didn't expect happened. In early February, Brian showed up at my house without warning. I was right in the middle of a work meeting when I heard someone knocking at the door. At first, I ignored it. I wasn't expecting anybody, and it didn't seem like the right moment to get up. But the knocking didn't stop. Eventually, I stepped away and opened the door, and there stood Brian. He looked rough, messy, tired, and more annoyed than I'd ever seen him. Before I could say a word, he muttered, "We need to talk," and just walked right past me into the house. I crossed my arms and faced him. "What's this about?" I asked. He didn't waste any time. "You need to quit acting like this and start helping again," he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe he was serious. "Helping," I said. "You mean paying your bills? I told you, I'm done with that." He gave me a hard look. "You're the one with money. Do you have any idea how hard it's been for us since you decided to pull back? The kids are barely getting by. Amanda's trying to hold everything together. We're drowning here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Do you even hear yourself right now?" I said. "You're a grown man, Brian. You've got a family. If you need more money, go out and earn it. It's not my job to fix your life." He fired back, "You've always helped before. Why are you being selfish now?" That word hit a nerve. Selfish. I repeated. You want to talk selfish? Let's talk about how you twisted things to mom and dad, made me out to be the bad guy, and kept me away from the family just because I didn't spend enough on your kids. And now you show up asking for more. You've got some nerve. He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off and held up a hand. We're done here, I said firmly. I'm not giving you another dollar. Don't come back until you're ready to act like a grown-up. He stood there for a moment, glaring, then turned and stormed out. I figured that'd be the end of it, at least for a while. I assumed he'd go complain to our parents, sulk for a bit, and then finally realize I wasn't backing down. Turns out, I was wrong. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, and normally, I wouldn't have answered. But something told me to pick up. Hello, I said. A man's voice came through. Is this Eric? Yeah, who's this? This is Eric Mitchell. I'm an attorney. I represent a client who's raised some concerns about financial matters involving your family. Do you have a moment to speak? The mention of a lawyer made my stomach drop. A lawyer? I asked. What kind of financial matters? He kept a polite but formal tone. I can't go into too much detail over the phone, but it has to do with money you've given to your brother and his family over the years. Specifically, how those funds were used. Would you be willing to meet in person to discuss it? My mind started racing. Was Brian using my name to borrow money? Did he mess with my financial info somehow? Or was this just some bizarre scare tactic to guilt me into paying again? I asked, who's your client? There was a short pause. I'm afraid I can't disclose that right now, he replied. But I can assure you, this isn't a lawsuit against you. It's more of an investigation. I hesitated but agreed to meet him anyway. My gut told me something deeper was going on here. This wasn't just Brian being difficult. The next day, I headed over to Eric Mitchell's office, having no clue what I was walking into. I sat down across from him, and almost immediately, he slid a folder across the desk. I'm representing Amanda, he said. I blinked in shock. Amanda? Why would she need a lawyer? Eric leaned forward and clasped his hands together. She believes Brian hasn't been honest with either of you when it comes to the money you've given them. She suspects he's been hiding it, from her and from you. I felt my stomach churn. Hiding it? What are you talking about? He opened the folder, revealing copies of bank records, receipts, even screenshots of text messages. She thinks Brian's been taking the money you gave to help the family, Eric explained, and funneling it into a separate account, one she didn't know existed. According to what Amanda found, Brian might have been using the money I gave him not for his family like I thought, but on gambling and other personal things. I stared at the documents in disbelief. All those times I helped him pay bills, covered school supplies, or chipped in during emergencies, you're telling me that money didn't even go to the kids? I asked. Eric nodded, his expression serious. That's what it looks like. Amanda only found out recently and came to me because she didn't know where else to turn. At first, she didn't want to involve you, but considering everything, she felt you had a right to know. I sat there, stunned. For years, Brian had been telling me he needed help to take care of his family. And all that time, he was lying, using the money for who knows what. I couldn't tell if I was more angry, hurt, or just embarrassed for falling for it. I cleared my throat and asked quietly, does Amanda have actual proof? Eric gave a small nod and slid the folder closer to me. Take a look. I opened it and flipped through the pages. It was all there, bank withdrawals, transfers, and dates that lined up with times I'd helped him. Money I sent for rent or school would end up moved into another account under his name. Then, from that account, there were charges to expensive restaurants, online gambling sites, and even a few hotel stays. I shook my head slowly and muttered, unbelievable. And Amanda knew about all this? I asked. Eric leaned forward. She just found the second account. She'd had her doubts for a while, but didn't have access to any of his bank info. Then a few weeks ago, she came across some printed statements he'd left out. That's when she realized what was going on and reached out to me. I leaned back in my chair, trying to take it all in. So, what now? Is she hoping I'll press charges or something? Eric shook his head. No, that's not what she's looking for right now. She just wants to protect herself and the kids. But she thought it was important you knew, especially in case Brian tries to pull something again. I gave a bitter little laugh. Too late. He already showed up at my house a few days ago, yelling at me to start helping again. Eric didn't seem surprised. That matches what Amanda told me. Sounds like the pressure is catching up to him now that your support is gone. And to be honest, he might be in deeper trouble than even Amanda knows. I stared at the paperwork again, thoughts spinning. A big part of me wanted to storm over to Brian's place and confront him on the spot. But I knew that'd just give him what he wanted, attention and drama. So instead, I asked, "What's Amanda planning to do now?" Eric paused for a moment. She's still weighing her options. Right now, she's focused on making sure she and the kids are safe financially and otherwise. But if things get worse, she's considering separation or taking legal action. Hearing that hit me harder than I expected. Amanda always seemed like the steady one, quiet, loyal, someone who'd stick by Brian no matter what. The fact that she was thinking about walking away told me just how bad things had gotten. As I stood up to leave, I thanked Eric for being upfront. He gave me a polite nod, and I walked out of the office with a weird mix of emotions, frustrated with Brian, worried for Amanda and the kids, and disappointed in myself for not noticing any of this sooner. But above all, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying Brian's weight on my shoulders. I knew the truth now, and there was no way I was ever letting him pull me back into that mess again. On the way home, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd learned, Brian's gambling, the hidden money, and Amanda quietly making moves to protect her family. It felt like I was living inside some family soap opera, only this one wasn't on TV. For the next few days, I kept to myself. I didn't call my parents. I didn't reach out to Brian. I just needed space to process it all. Turns out, the silence didn't sit well with Brian. One evening, just as I was getting ready to sit down for dinner, his name popped up on my phone screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, honestly. I wanted to, but something made me pick it up. "What do you want, Brian?" I said, not even trying to hide the exhaustion in my voice. He didn't waste any time. "We need to talk," he said, his voice tight, almost panicked. "You said something to Amanda, didn't you?" I raised my eyebrows. "What are you even talking about?" "Don't play dumb," he snapped. "She's been acting weird ever since Christmas, and now she's talking about lawyers and separation. I know you've been filling her head with this stuff." I couldn't help it. I laughed. A hard, bitter laugh. "You think I'm the problem?" I said. "You're the one who hid money from her, gambled it away, and lied for who knows how long. If she's finally had enough, that's on you, not me." There was a pause on the other end before he spoke again. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but I do," I shot back, my voice rising. "Amanda told me everything about the secret account, the gambling, all the money you wasted while I bent over backwards trying to help you. You took advantage of everyone who tried to care about you. You're not just a bad husband, Brian. You're a fraud." He started to yell again, but I cut him off. "You know what?" I said, stopping him mid-rant. "I'm done." And I hung up before he could get another word in. My hands were shaking when I set the phone down, but I felt strangely relieved. I've been holding all of that in for way too long. That was it. No more rescuing. No more excuses. No more pretending Brian just needed a little help. If Amanda decided to leave him, that was his mess to clean up. And if he tried to pull me into it again, I'd make sure everyone knew exactly what he'd been doing. The next day, Amanda gave me a call. Her voice was quieter than usual. "Did Brian call you?" she asked carefully. "Yeah," I said. He wasn't too happy. She hesitated. "Something happened." I confronted him about the gambling and the account. "And?" I asked. "He admitted to some of it," she said. "But he's still trying to spin it like it wasn't a big deal." "Are you okay?" I asked her gently. "I'm all right," she said, even though I could hear the weight in her voice. "But I'm tired of making excuses for him. The kids deserve better." I knew things between them were bad, but hearing her say that out loud, it hit harder than I expected. It felt like the beginning of something final. "Whatever you decide to do, I've got your back," I told her. "Thank you," she said softly. "And I'm sorry for everything. The way we treated you over Christmas, it wasn't right." I should have said something then. We talked for a little while longer, and by the time we hung up, I felt a strange kind of closure. My relationship with Brian might have fallen apart completely, but Amanda and the kids weren't my enemies. If she found the courage to stand up to him, I wasn't going to hold anything against her. Still, even after that call, I couldn't shake the feeling that Brian wasn't done stirring up trouble. A few weeks later, I got a short text from Amanda. Just 3 simple words. "We're going today." Amanda told me she was leaving the state with the kids while Brian was away on what he called a business trip, though honestly, I assumed it was just another excuse to sneak off and gamble. She'd packed everything up, rented a moving van, and was planning to leave before he even knew what was happening. She didn't want to say a word to him until everything was legally in place. I called her immediately. I just couldn't stay there any longer, she said quietly. I've been pretending things were okay for too long, and I can't keep doing that. I asked how she was holding up, genuinely worried about her and the kids. After a brief pause, she said, I hate to ask, but do you think you could help us out? Just for a little while. You don't even have to explain, I told her. I've got you covered. And so I did help, this time not out of obligation or guilt, but because it felt right. For once, I wasn't being manipulated. I was helping someone who truly needed it, and that made all the difference. As for Brian, when he came home and realized the house was empty, he completely lost it. He called me, ranting and yelling, blaming me for everything, accusing me of turning Amanda against him and ruining his life. I let him go off for a bit, just listened without saying much. Then, when he finally ran out of steam, I said, you know, maybe none of this would have happened if you'd spent more time being a decent husband and father and less time chasing bets. Then I ended the call with, good luck with that, and hung up. Since then, the kids have been settling into their new school just fine. Amanda's landed a stable job, and she finally feels like she has control over her life again. Last I heard, Brian's still out there pointing fingers and blaming everyone but himself, but to be honest, that's not my concern anymore. So yeah, I guess if you want to call it that, there's your happy ending.